Bloody, bruised, yet unbroken. The veterans of Osgiliath stand defiant against the overwhelming forces of Mordor. I'm Joe from Windrush Wargamers, and here's how I converted up some Osgiliath Veterans for Middle-earth strategy battle game. My Gondor army is a strange one. It's the first army I painted up after I got back into the hobby after about a 10-year layoff. For that reason, it holds a lot of sentimental value to me. It's a reminder of where I started out in the hobby, and it's fun to look back and see just how far I've progressed. But recently, I've been thinking that I should maybe strip them down and start again, or get some new models in to upgrade them to where I am now. So when user Chaos J recommended in the comment section of another video that he would like to see me try my hand at converting up some Osgiliath Veterans, I thought this would be a great idea to update my army without needing to strip any older models. The Osgiliath Veteran miniatures look fundamentally quite similar to the standard Minas Tirith Warriors, with three exceptions. Firstly, a lot of them are injured. They have bandages or open wounds, where they're nursing some injuries as a result of the constant siege by the forces of Mordor. Secondly, a lot of them are carrying extra baggage. This is probably because supply lines have been interrupted and they're having to carry all the supplies they can around with them. Lastly, a lot of their clothing is very tattered. With those three factors in mind, I took a look at my bits box to see how much Minas Tirith Warriors I had. And I had a fair amount, as you can see. I had to rifle through to see what I could use. I had some complete models, like these bowmen. I had a few broken models. And I had a few test pieces for random paint schemes I was going to try elsewhere. With my Minas Tirith bits box well and truly rummaged through, I had a look through my sprues to see if there's anything I could use to kit bash. One sprue that jumped out to me immediately was the Frostgrave Soldier Sprue. This is because of all the bags and sacks that could be used for the additional luggage. Once I'd picked out a few complete bodies, preferably without any paint on them, I wasted no time cutting the bags off of the sprue and seeing how they fit, and to my surprise, even though the scale is slightly larger for Frostgrave, these fit pretty well for the most part. As well as the various bags and satchels, I made use of the rope. This I thought would be really useful in urban warfare for sort of abseiling down buildings, as well as sort of repairing bridges and whatnot. When I first started this project, I thought I'd make maybe 3, so it's nice and easy to film. And then I was like, well, maybe 6. That's quite a good round number. And then, after looking at all the bits I could use from this sprue and another sprue, which I'll get onto in a second, I realised, what's the point, I'll just do a full 12. And so, I kind of made a full squad when I didn't even intend to. With the bags sorted, I turned my attention to the kind of scrappy nature of these guys. I wanted some unhelmeted heads. For this, instead of using the more heroic scale of the Frostgrave Sprue, I decided to use some historicals, namely these Perry miniatures. I think one set is the Zulu, and I can't remember what the other set is. These worked really well as they were the same scale as the Minas Tirith soldiers, so the heads all fit and the arms looked natural. This is probably because the Perry twins sculpted both these and the historical miniatures, so they just sort of work together. Another way I wanted to show that these were Osgiliath veterans is having them use Scavenge Weaponry. In desperate times you need to take whatever you can, and these guys have had to use shields and spears from the enemy. I think overall, making Osgiliath veterans is kind of just making them look irregular and uneven. I think that's the best way to put it. And what could make them more uneven than them using these nasty orc weapons? And finally, the last component of the 3 is the battle damage. So using some pliers and some Stanley knives, I cut corners off and I dug in some grooves to look like battle damage, like the slashing of swords and axes and whatnot. With all the kit bashing done, it was time for me to move on to the bases. I used these cobblestone bases from Renedra and glued them down to the existing Black Games Workshop bases to give them a little bit more height. So I clipped off the slaughter tabs from the bottom of their feet, put them to one side, I needed them later. I then drilled a hole in the heel and using a paper clip I pinned them into the base. The bases are a good start, but they don't quite look like the ruined city of Osgiliath just yet. To get that effect I needed rubble, and lots of it. By filing down the corners of the slaughter tabs, I was able to make it look a little bit like wood. Some off clippings from the sprue itself was used as bricks, as well as some cubes of MDF. And finally, for the really dusty debris, I used some Geek Gaming Scenics. Simple stuff, super glue for the bigger things, and Geek Gaming Scenics basing adhesive for the smaller rubble. This is the stage that gives anyone hope when they're working on a kit bashing project. You can kind of see the stories emerging. This guy has some rope on his back, he's picked up an orc spear, he's got his chin up defiantly, and he's marching back into combat. This next one is one of my favourites. I knew I wanted to use him pretty much every time I fielded an army, so I gave him pretty much every single weapon. His upper body is that of a Minas Tirith cavalry. His left arm is basically bracing for impact with a shield, but without the shield it kind of looks like his arm is in a sling. And lastly, this guy with a torch, and so I added this little pouch on his back which is carrying scrolls, so I figured maybe he's someone who wanders out at night to recover sacred or holy writings of the Gondorian people so that they don't fall into the enemy hands. Kind of looks like a Gondorian Indiana Jones. When you use numerous different kits to kit bash, you're quite often left with a few gaps, like this chap here, so this next step is just filling it in with some green stuff. To do this, I'm just pushing it in with some dental tools and then smoothing it down with some rubber tipped clay sculptors. I'm not the best sculptor, and quite often a mistake I make is not letting the first layer of green stuff dry, so this time I made extra sure I left it for a full day to dry, and I came back and sculpted bits like the straps to this backpack, for instance. It's at this stage I wanted to recreate one of these sort of classic veteran looks, which is the wrapping around the shoulder. And so to this I just sort of rolled out the green stuff into a sausage, pressed it down with the dental tools, and after it started to firm up, using wet clay shapers, I kind of smoothed it out so it looks a little bit more like fabric. I used that same process but on a smaller scale for the bandages on the bare arms. Using a slightly different method, I flattened it out like a pancake and cut to shape and tried to make a sling out of it. After a long time going back and forth to make sure that it went fully over the shoulder and fully round the back, I think the sling looks quite good. And with that, the veterans are fully sculpted, kit bashed and based, and they're ready to get some paint on them. I won't bore you with the paint recipe, but whilst I'm slapping some paint on, I think I'll talk a little bit about the Osgiliath Veteran profile. Now, I'll preface this by saying I am the furthest thing away from a competitive player, but there's a couple of things I noticed about the Osgiliath Veteran profile. It's kind of a weird one. So first of all, it's 1 point more expensive than a standard Minas Tirith troop, which is confusing, but they lose this special rule of shield wall. So compared to other elite choices like say the Guard of the Fountain Court, they're at a distinct disadvantage when it comes to defense, as they're incapable of reaching that magic defense 7. They do have courage 4, which will stack to 5 with the army bonus, but compared to having a bodyguard like a Guard of the Fountain Court or a Citadel Guard, that's kind of a moot point. And with a fight value of 4+ and a normal bow in the war gear, they're not exactly going to be that good at shooting, are they? Because the Ranger of Gondor has a fight value of 3+, and the Citadel Guard has a longbow, which is obviously more powerful. So in terms of what they excel at, you're kind of left with their one special rule, which is loyal to captains, which gives them a +1 to their fight value if they're within 6 inches of Boromir or Faramir. This is increased by an additional +1 to a fight value of 5, which is the same as elves, if they're within 6 inches of Boromir with the banner of Minas Tirith. So I guess that is the real only use for them in this regard, is as a fight value battery. So even though it's quite situational, that can be really powerful if you're going up against heroes who are fight 4 or 5. So with the painting stage finished, I can show you some sort of more glory shot on the turntable and with a bit of terrain. It was at this end stage I realised, have I just created a battle company? With all the rope, and the bags, and the pouches, and the torches. Those are all upgrades you can buy for your battle company, so I guess I've made an Osgiliath Veteran themed battle company as well. And that's it. Thank you so much for watching. You can probably tell by my voice I've got a pretty hanging cold at the moment, so apologies if the audio isn't as good as it normally is. Feel free to make suggestions in the comments section about what I could convert next, because as you can see by this was Chaos J's idea, so I do get round to doing them if you're interested and if they excite me, so feel free to make some suggestions in the bottom. I've been Joe from Windrush Wargamers. Thank you for watching my conversion video on how to make Osgiliath Veterans for Middle-earth strategy battle game. Catch you in the next one.